For months, someone was living in the Gruber family's attic, watching them sleep, eating their food, and planning their deaths. On March 31st, 1922, footprints in the snow led to their isolated farmhouse, but none led away. Andreas Gruber had been hearing footsteps above his bedroom for weeks. Tools went missing from his barn. Strange sounds echoed through the house at night. He even found a newspaper he'd never bought lying on his kitchen table. But Andreas made a fatal mistake. He never called the police. Instead, he sent away his maid, telling her the house was haunted. 3 days later, all 6 members of the Gruber family were dead, their skulls crushed by a mattock. But here's what makes this case truly terrifying. Someone stayed in the house for days after the murders, feeding the livestock, eating their food, and keeping their fires burning. The killer wasn't just hiding in their attic, they had made themselves completely at home. Hinterkaifeck was a remote farm in Bavaria, Germany, 70 kilometers north of Munich. The name literally means behind Kaifeck, and it truly was in the middle of nowhere. The Gruber family had lived there for decades. 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, his wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, and her 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph. Their maid, Maria Baumgartner, had just arrived that very day, March 31st, 1922. She was replacing the previous maid who had fled 6 months earlier, claiming the house was haunted by ghostly footsteps and unexplained sounds. Andreas had dismissed these stories as nonsense, but in the weeks leading up to the murders, even he couldn't ignore the signs. Someone was definitely living on his property. The question wasn't if, it was who. And that person had been watching, waiting, and planning for far longer than anyone realized. The warning signs had been there for months, but Andreas Gruber ignored them all. In the autumn of 1921, he discovered footprints in the snow leading from the forest to his house, but no tracks leading back. He found his keys in places he'd never left them. Tools disappeared from locked sheds, only to reappear days later. Most disturbing of all, he kept hearing footsteps in the attic above his bedroom, always at night, always when the family was asleep. His previous maid, who had worked there for 2 years, suddenly quit in September 1921. She told neighbors the house was haunted, that she heard voices and footsteps when the family wasn't home. Andreas laughed it off, but then came the newspaper incident. On March 30th, just 1 day before the murders, Andreas found a Munich newspaper on his kitchen table that he had never purchased. When he asked his family about it, no one claimed to have brought it in. Someone else was reading their mail, eating their food, and living in their space. But Andreas never called the authorities. That decision would cost his entire family their lives. On April 4th, 1922, neighbors finally investigated when no one from Hinterkaifeck appeared at church. What they found defied explanation. In the barn, they discovered 4 bodies: Andreas, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and granddaughter Cecilia. All had been killed with a mattock, a farming tool with a pick on one side and an adze blade on the other. Their skulls were crushed, suggesting surprise attacks from behind. But the real horror was inside the house. The maid Maria and 2-year-old Joseph were found in their bedrooms, also killed with the same weapon. Young Joseph had been alive for hours after the attack. Investigators found torn fabric in his hands, evidence he had tried to crawl away. But here's where the case becomes truly disturbing. Someone had been living in the house for days after the murders. The cattle had been fed and milked. Fresh meals were prepared and eaten. Fires had been kept burning in the fireplaces. Neighbors even reported seeing smoke from the chimney for 3 days after the family died. The killer hadn't fled. They had made themselves completely at home in their victim's house. The evidence painted a picture of methodical stalking that had gone on for months. In the attic, investigators found clear signs of habitation: a makeshift bed, food scraps, and areas where dust had been disturbed by someone lying down for extended periods. The killer had been living directly above the family's bedrooms, listening to their conversations, learning their routines, and planning their deaths. But the most chilling discovery was in Andreas's own notes. Police found his diary entries from the weeks before the murders, describing the strange occurrences. Heard footsteps in attic again last night, found hammer missing from tool shed. Cecilia says she saw a face in the window, but no one was there when I looked. The final entry, dated March 30th, just one day before the murders, simply read, "They are here." Andreas knew someone was stalking his family, but his rural German pride prevented him from seeking help. He thought he could handle the situation himself. Instead, his silence allowed a killer to study every aspect of their lives, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. For over a century, investigators assumed the killer fled immediately after the murders, but recently discovered evidence suggests something far more disturbing. The killer didn't just stay for a few days. They may have lived at Hinterkaifeck for weeks or even months before the murders, and possibly returned multiple times afterward. Local records show that food deliveries continued to be accepted at the farm for nearly a week after the bodies were discovered. Someone was still there, still living in the house, still pretending to be part of the Gruber family. Even more shocking, forensic analysis of the crime scene photos reveals that some of the victims' clothes had been changed after death. The killer had undressed and redressed the bodies, suggesting a level of intimacy and control that goes beyond simple murder. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a crime of passion. This was someone who had become obsessed with the Gruber family's daily life. Someone who wanted to literally take their place. The most terrifying question remains: was this their first victims, or had they done this before? Over 100 suspects were questioned, but the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved to this day. The farmhouse was demolished in 1923, but locals claim the land is still cursed. Some theories point to Victoria's mysterious lover, the father of young Joseph, whose identity she never revealed. Others suspect a drifter or mentally ill vagrant who had been living rough in the Bavarian forests. But the most disturbing theory is that the killer was someone the family knew. A neighbor, a relative, or even a rejected suitor who had been secretly living in their attic, watching and waiting for months. The truth died with the Gruber family on that snowy March night in 1922. But one thing is certain. Somewhere in that isolated farmhouse, a predator had been living in the shadows, studying their every move and planning their deaths with methodical precision. The Hinterkaifeck murders remind us that sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't strangers who break in. They're the ones who are already inside, watching you sleep.